Hello everyone, Master Xeon1201 here, and without further ado, let's get started. So I'm going to split the view, and we're going to turn this into an image editor, and just drag our image there. Whenever I tap in edit mode, it appears that the UVs won't appear on an image editor compared to before when I was actually using a UV image editor because I'm just old school. The other thing is I took one of these shots, I believe this one, and clipped it out and made it its own image. So we're just going to drag it onto the 3D view and make it a reference image in the form of an empty. So I'm looking at it from top view, and we're just going to take our cube, tab into edit mode, and merge everything at center and just begin creating the basic shape. So I've been modeling this thing over and over since the first video because I wasn't entirely pleased with the result, and also the amount of time it takes the first time was just inadequate. Usually on subsequent attempts we can dwarf that time and pretty much parity our first attempts with the amount of efficiencies that are able to be saved on subsequent runs. So for that reason, there's always a redo in a model's future, especially if I don't feel that the workflow used was the most fluid. So we're going to just select all these points on this line, and I'm going to right click and use Loop Tools G-Stretch, which basically does what Mirror Tools would do whenever you set it to 2 points. But notice Aaron misusing it in a recent video, and I was like, I should start doing that. So let's press Control-Shift-B and roll the wheel. However, he should definitely turn off those gizmos, but I'm just being facetious. But Blender gizmos, you'll never see me with them up on screen, you know, the little XYZ handles, not unless I truly need them, but for most operations, you do not. So we're just sliding these pieces in, really not, just trying to get the base of this reference, not so much the absolute image, because Sub-D is going to be shrinking things a bit, so we got to also take that into consideration. I'm going to select this edge, control click all the way over to this edge, then to this edge, and then maybe to this edge, and we'll just extrude this down. And with our image being so clippy with our mesh, we'll just move it below, so that way we can really see our mesh and focus on that. And press Control-Shift-Tab, let's set our snapping to vertices, so that way we can get from there to there, and we'll add one additional loop. And let's snap it to the base of where we started this ascent down, and then we can just press F to fill this. So this area has become a point of contention for me over subsequent attempts, and I'm no stranger to it. However, there are some interesting shapes involved with this that are worth discussing. For example, when we look at this, this is just a big flat face, but there is a round transition happening with this side of things. And there's also a round transition happening here. On this side, we have this area having an early termination and then turning inside. So I do want to get that because this area currently does not have that. So first we'll give it a loop. Let's flatten it first. So SC0, we'll bring it up to here. And from here, let's just turn on Verti-Mergy so we can really get this party started. And I'm just debating on how to best get this shape. I'm going to first try ripping it, not like that. Let's try it again. V, V. So we can hide that one. And with this one, this is the area that we want to solve. So we're also going to rip this area off as well and hide it. You know, I'm just kind of thinking on my feet here. Didn't even give it a practice run this morning. I'm so frustrated with this piece that I don't even want to practice it anymore because I nail it into practice. I choke on the video, which is probably a common thing. But I truly hate it when I'm recording a video and I have to end it because the result just wasn't satisfactory. And that happened to me last night. I was like, yeah, I'm going to get this. But I ended up in a situation I just topologically didn't want to be held accountable for. So today we're going to try something different. So something like that, we're really preserving this interior turn that happens and terminates early. And so I guess at this point we can begin discussing adding this area. I didn't even turn on Z through for the knife, but it doesn't matter because there was no additional mesh to cut through. but I'm a big stickler for using knife in a cut through state. Let's also take these two faces and extrude them out, and then we could grab these and extrude them up. Just getting something like that. And let's take these three, or this one, and bevel it into these three. And we don't want any interior faces, definitely. So let's press Alt X, and we're just going to hit it with a bisect mod, just so we send it to the other side. And so far, so good. However, this is where things get annoying. So what we want to do is flatten this face to this face. So I'm just going to press Q. And under Mesh Tools, we have Flatten the Face, where basically it will just make the second face congruent to the first one. That, of course, sacrifices a little bit of integrity of this area. So we're just going to have to roll with that. I'm going to press B, and the goal isn't so much to model the shape absolutely in this first phase, but really to get a subdivision block in of what it could be after a layer's been applied, and then we can apply a layer of subdivision, and then from there go in and refine it. And this is a process I refer to as upresing, where basically we just get it set up to survive one level of sub D, and then we apply it, and then from there we just start working from that second level, because the first level is just too sparse, too simple, whatever the case may be. It's just too little geometry for us to do intensive geometric negotiation, because, you know, the smaller your point count is, the more curvature stress that's happening for each face. So that means the more of a chance you could encounter a topological defect and just have your mesh just go awry. So there's definite reasons to why I use the certain geometry counts I do. It's because they're definitely safe. For me, your results may differ. So if we look at the back, we also have interior faces here. We don't want that. So I'm just looking at this thinking, where's my origin? My origin is there. So let's Alt X, bisect mod to split this, and we have something like this, which is pretty much almost all the way there. In fact, let's go ahead and save the file. And I've been calling these Topostudy soap bins. So in Power Save, we'll just type that in and just click on the button, which has given us 0.1, even though this is like probably 0.5. This piece is deceptive. You know, I'm sure there's people out there that can accomplish it in a matter of minutes with very minimal keystrokes, which is why it's a ponder to me, because I feel like I'm missing something. But only practice will show you the way, at least for me. So I almost want to move this out, but we see that that would be a mistake to move it so far from where we definitely specified our bounds being correct with the image. So from here, let's take this to the next level. So I'm going to save the file, and let's just put subdivision on it. So we see that subdivision basically has eaten this thing alive, taken its lunch. So let's press Q and sharpen, just to harden up the areas that just did not work out definitely. So like I said, what we want is for this to survive a level of subdivision. And just looking at the geometry for this area just makes me ponder. Let's press Q and let's try flatten the face again. And we're just reflattening that to face. And let's try flattening this to face as well. So maybe something like that. Then we come back and we flatten to face. However, we want to make sure that our selection order is correct. So I'm just checking to see what it's like to be flattened to the first one, what it's like to be flattened to the second one. Let's GG in order to force that edge to be perpendicular. And really, we want to save this plane no matter what. I'm probably being over obsessive. You know, as I'm working, I'm just mentally troubleshooting my process, asking, you know, where did I fail, my lord? You know, like I said, when you're using sub D is your master. So sub D has such specific rules it wants you to follow. You know, no visitors after 7. You know, really no visitors at all. We're just still analyzing things, looking at what should be sharpened for the next level, because we can always get in and refine our roundness that we're going for. And of course in this area we definitely want that to be rounded, but we do want a hard termination to avoid any sort of funny business with this area. So I'll just slide a few things around, you know, still fairly loose with it. But I feel that we were able to save all that we needed. In fact, if we turn that back to round, we get something like that, and then we can slide geometry away in order to relax it. Let's unmark that, let's unmark that, and look at what we have. And so this is our form so far. And you know, if we press Alt V, this is our wireframe, really basic wireframe. In fact, if we wanted to, we could solve all this, because if we apply a level of sub-D without it being solved to some cursory level, it's just going to have its way with it. So I'm debating on if we should terminate a loop in order to turn this into less, which is probably the best route, because the most that I'm willing to give this for this level of solve is one loop. Any additional loops than that, it just starts to get weird. So we'll just do a redirect quad and a try, which will also turn into a redirect. And I'm just calling them by those names because I know that's what they'll be when this modifier gets applied. If you're unfamiliar with the patterns of subdivision applying, I definitely recommend, you know, grabbing a plane, getting with knife, and just cutting some shapes in it and just looking at the solves, just so you understand that, you know, subdivision isn't entirely your enemy. It's just the decisions that it will make are somewhat limited. So for this, I really want to flatten this, but I just don't know who to trust. I trust that area. So let's set our pivot to the 3D cursor and just SZ0 to flatten to it. And let's try grabbing this face and this face, and we're going to try to reflatten it. I know, really just flatten all day, right? And GG to slide. And it looks like it's actually worse than it was. Like I said, this face as a focal point is just such a pain. So the other thing is that we need to really round this out a bit, like so. So we actually get the transition that we want to happen with this particular area. And so we could be doing it with this area as well. However, we're just going to save that for the next phase. Let's continue to look around and judge which of our surfaces need to have a rounder transition with its surface. For example, this isn't the best decision, but you know, with sub-D increase, the negotiation process is definitely a tough one. So we could just be applying things, moving on to the next phase and talking about that. But really getting this right on the block end is so important. I will dance with the block end for days, and blast through the detailing phase, you know, adding all the details and Boolean it up and all that stuff. That stuff will take like 30 minutes, but the block end determines what you're going to be kept with, what's going to be your plans for this evening. And while I want to loosen this in order to give this that nice rounding, we're not going to be able to do that. So just looking at things, just checking our edge flows. We probably could use one more edge flow here just to prevent this from turning into something unspecified, because it's unnecessary for us to do that to ourselves. So 13 minutes in, we have the basic block shape made. And this area, I feel like we could solve it just a little bit better. So I'm going to do something possibly not smart, and that's slide this geo in, slide this geo in, come back to this one, slide this geo in, and we're just going to pretend like this was always 3 loops and not 4. We're also going to relax just a little bit of our smoothing that we have happening in the, or a little bit of our sharpening. We could press Shift E and add crease manually if we wanted to kind of manually manage that area, which I'm not against. I just have never been able to get crease to behave well with median numbers that are not 0 and 1. It's either hard as a rock or let's leave I rock. So we're just going to slide these over, maybe grab these SX, let's get out of 3D cursor, SX0, and we just move these over slightly, GG, something like that. And from here, let us come out of local mode where we've been so long. Shift-D, duplicate. We'll hide the original. Someone is phone calling me. Always, who is calling me? Okay, one moment. Sorry about that. That time the phone call was from my brother. I don't know if I ever mentioned in my previous videos, but I'm cursed with so many people being dead. So I'll take that call. So let us continue. And we're just going to grab these edges and GG slide and continue on. For this, I'm just debating in my head if we should do a redirect where we basically turn this area into a quad formation and stop letting the geometry just kind of run roughshod on us, because it is. We have this big redirect happening and we probably don't actually need that for what we're going for, because we're going for control. And for control to occur, we need to really quarantine these areas of curvature so they go through their operation successfully. Otherwise, they will not go through successfully. So just playing with random combinations here. So maybe something like that would be a little bit better. However, we ended up trimming our most crucial area with the try. But I'm just looking at it and just making sure it's holding its form together. We'll slide these two, slide these from, really just even that out just because it looked a little offset. And let's just do this. I'm going to save the file in case it's a disaster in the next 5 minutes. And I'm always nervous when it comes to applying a subdivision modifier. I don't know why, I just always am. So let's first unmark everything and let's just put real subdivision on the mesh. And this is basically our result after applying one level of sub D. So we have a lot of work to do. Basically, we want to now get into the reinforcement phase where we are reinforcing the edges that matter and getting rid of the edges that don't matter. However, in this case, I'm pretty sure all the edges matter. And in some previous demonstrations, I tried to remove edges that didn't matter and end up sacrificing integrity in other places of the model. So you could probably accomplish this with the lower version. However, me personally, I am going to opt to take the mesh to a higher level just so it's a little bit easier to deal with. So we want to put the mirror above the sub D so that way we can at least see the correct topology. And I'm really just looking at this. Last time I tried a different strategy where I inset the geometry. I don't think I'm going to do that this time. Also, we're not going to slide an entire circumnavigating edge all the way around it. That's just crazy. Instead, we will just deal in partials, just deal in the regions that we're actually looking at. So this area is definitely about to become a little complicated as its relationship status. We really, really want to protect this perimeter no matter what. If you look at the original video, this perimeter was one of the first areas that was lost, which was such an immense loss, at least to me. I look at that video in retrospect and I'm like, oof, I can't let that, I can't move on to the next chapter of this pressure washer until I sort that out. That's how serious it is. So if we turn off the wireframe, this is what we're looking at. So we're not doing too bad, but we are going to have to tighten a lot of areas up just so we get the same type of curvature we're looking at from the picture. But this particular approach is just one that, it's not recommended, but it's definitely a way to approach sub D, and that is, just leveling up that modifier and just basically dealing with that topology on that level. Build it real simple, basically the block it in method, which I always endorse. Block it in, build it up, and then from there take it where you need to go. But if you're trying to just be super efficient and work it on low, have fun with that. Life's too short for me to be doing that though. I'd rather have a couple of negotiable tries and some questionable areas than have the entire model be limited by topology. I mean, when you're making a thing, there's only one success criteria, right? That's literally the thing. So we're just sliding loops and just thinking about what we want to do. I really want to put a loop here to reinforce the other side, but that's just not in the cards in the way that we were just trying. In fact, let's right click, and then when we subdivide it will stop short, and we also want it to stop short probably about here. I know, crazy talk. I'm always doing something experimental with the geometry, and it always will come back to haunt me because you just can't hide. But sometimes you can get away with it. I mean, we have enough geo now where I can get away with a few questionable topological choices, but we definitely want to put those choices in areas where torsion won't come into play. In fact, what we need to do at this particular area is definitely not what I'm doing. What we need to do is have a loop to reinforce this entire area that actually comes around, but really we could terminate that loop early because, you know, we already applied a level of subdivision, so everything has become, you know, little two of itself. There's just more now, so we want to definitely hold that crease, and now we want to work the crease that's happening around this area topologically and not via actual crease. So I suppose this one deserves to live. You know, sometimes I'm just drastic and I'm like, you know what, it just needs to go, but the mesh will remind you, take me out if you wanna, take me out if you wanna. I'm holding critical surface data. Test me. I'll leak it to the enemy. Well, I won't leak it to anybody because if you dissolve me, I won't exist, but you need that data, is what these faces tell me. So for this area, I almost don't feel like I need every other loop, you know, something like that, just a simpler solution. For this, we can offset that loop, which means this one's redundant. So there is a little bit of reduction able to be done, but we just want to be careful of where we're going with it. And we're only about 22 minutes in. The goal is definitely to do this in a lesser amount of time than previous. However, if we can at least make it look better than previous, then time is inconsequential. So really just looking at our shape. And just analyzing how we should slide things as far as creating topological torsion. Maybe even something like that, but having this converge there, here's where I will begin making some mistakes. So we'll reinforce this edge to create another interior because I just feel like we could topologically hold this form better inside. But because we've put a triangle straight on the junction, we have to reconsider some things. So just thinking out loud here, you know, this area being 1 is, you know, not my favorite thing. I'd rather it be 2. So we at least was looking at something like this. I mean, we just kind of moved a lot of mesh into the neighborhood, but I feel we can make it work out, even though it's going to get a little bit experimental in some of these flatty areas. Like I said, you're not here for my topological prowess, more for the possible lure of us surviving yet another subdivision session. So I'm going to grab this, and they're now a connection, which means this can be a quad, and the triangle's been offset to another area that we can then just hit with a loop in the face in order to relax. So like I said, all of this that I'm doing, I already kind of envisioned it would be regrettable, but let's find out if we can make this work. So I'm going to slide this, but I'm going to press E, F in order to make it even, and then flip it. So we get something like that, and we're just getting in here and just looking at our result, hoping for the best. However, the more that we add to our excuse, the more knots in the head that we will be receiving. So sometimes the next negotiation tactic for me is to try to relax the geometry that's happening in an area, like we're seeing here. Something like that. However, I still see a small little hit, so I will think even bigger. We will jump to here with J and not H. H is just so close to J. That's probably my only complaint about J. is just so close to H. I should probably take that up with keyboard manufacturers, not so much with Blender. Blender just tries to be witty and make every key mean something that it's doing. You know, H for hide. It makes sense. Definitely makes sense. And I try to tell that to people when they're learning Blender. I'm like, just stick with the keys, man. H to hide. Does that make sense? Doesn't P, well, not P, Control P to parent make sense? However, as I say it out loud, it does sound a little crazy. We are going to select this edge and subdivide, and we are going to add a loop here. We'll bring that loop up to here, and really just debating on what we should do with some of this geometry. Obviously, consolidation is one of my favorite options. And just thinking about what direction we actually want things to flow, because we've rewritten this like 4 different times, and every time we're just maintaining our fear of this particular area. But let's move along. Still looking at this piece, and I think we actually got it. I'm just over obsessing, because we could just keep on tweaking and regenerating the solution for this in order to get it absolutely perfect. But when I look at this, I also feel like this area has kind of lost its own integrity. Like, it shouldn't be so sunken down. So that is a ponder for me as well. Let's try pressing O and use connected only, and we'll just bring it up, maybe ever so gently, maybe less gently. And with this particular edge, renegotiation of its position will just alleviate some of its curvature, and then we can get rid of that double point that we had for cutting it short. So we have an interior loop flow. Sometimes these loops can get a little bit tricky to continue reading as you keep working your way across them over and over. But with that, I believe now we have at least accomplished this phase of creating our part. However, we can definitely get in and refine things even more and sharpen up their solutions. For example, I don't see so much of an arc happening in this particular area as much as I see a straight line. So let's just grab our wardens of this area and just slide them to and fro, which will kind of linearize those to be something a little more contained. And let's see, what else do we want to do? I don't even like the flow that's happening here. I'd rather have a redirect happening on the inside from all sides, making it definitely more rounded. But instead, let's come out and just look at what we have in accordance with our reference image. And I feel like this is probably being indicated a little taller than it's supposed to be, just due to our reference image. And I feel like this is a little more straight. And I'm receiving a phone call again. So many phone calls, so let us jump back into this. What I'm going to do is grab this loop. However, you must always be thankful that there's people to call you on the phone. They could also all be dead. We're all dead. So let us just grab this and just GG. And as I'm working on this, I'm still listening to Zelda Wave, which is just trippy Zelda soundtrack with vaporwave aesthetics on it. But I must admit, it just puts me in the zone. In fact, my favorite song is just now starting. So let us just GG slide this. I just want to make it a little bit more even. And before we can continue, we have to redo the topology of this area, because I just feel it could be better. We'll press GG, E to make it even. And let's, of course, linearize what areas are definitely going to be needing preservation. So I'm going to form a connection here. Maybe something like so. And I'm just looking at the geometry, and you know, this is that game of Tetris I'll be talking about, where you're getting in and you're just solving. So we have like 3 coinciding flows all working against each other. So only one master can be satiated. or at least with my current level of topological craftiness, can only one master be satiated. So we have our flow going across. We run this into a diamond quad. We have this doubling out, which means we can quad that, which redirects our triangle over to this area. We don't want to add any additional loops that are unnecessary, but some areas are really up for reconsideration, like that one may not even need to exist. But let's just rearrange what we have. Such a questionable area topologically to solve, but I just keep seeing quad opportunities and then I just go for them. So, you know, with these two tries being on the same row, we could at least put a redirect between them, resulting in all of this basically now being all quad aside from this one area that just did not work out. And just thinking about it, do we want to even do anything about this? Because it's not really hurting the shape a whole lot, but what we have going on in here is definitely beginning to hurt the shape a bit. So let's just slide it around, still being a little experimental with our solution here. And just in my head, I'm already telling myself, yeah, I might have to revisit this again, because it should be even easier than this. But you know, I just really want that plane in this particular area to work out. So hence all the fighting. But like I always say, I sometimes can over obsess with a piece of geometry. So in sculpt mode, I'm just pressing G to go into grab, and we can just start pulling areas out just to get a little bit more adherent to the image. You know, the idea of using sculpt with subdivision geometry shouldn't be that big of a stretch, especially with the topology brush control behaviors now and the functionality that offers. But pretty sure we're doing more damage than good, so we want to keep our changes kind of minimal. But you know, this definitely beats going into proportional editing in order to make these changes. And while we're not trying to exactly adhere to the image, we can definitely get ourselves a little bit more in the ballpark. In fact, doing more damage didn't help right now, but that's fine. So now we're looking at this and it's a little bit closer. I still see a few invisible knots that I'd rather not be seeing. So let's just begin pulling the geometry back to something a little bit more controllable and also a little bit rounder. You know, we have so much geometry that we can really get in here and do some good, but we also have enough geometry that we can do a tremendous amount of bad. So we definitely don't want to do that. It's a really delicate process. But if you can be gentle with the grab is a hell of a modeling tool. It's like proportional editing the circle, or at least that's how I look at it sometimes in my head. So let's go back to object mode and take a look at our wireframe, and this is what we're looking at so far. So a little heavy, but now we can finally put in the circle on the other side and begin progressing to the final part of things. So I'm not even sure how the bottom of this thing looks. I mean, I've really been trying to piece together what's going on with it based from the bottom, but on other screenshots it just looks like, wow. In this one it looks like it goes in and then it bows out a bit, and then there's like a circle here and a circle. I'm not doing that. That's insanity. Gotta take it easy on myself with this sub-D masochism. So for the other side, we'll at least round it to, I don't know, 3. You know, keep it nice and controlled, and we'll bring this loop up. And we can also take this time to reinforce it. Press P to make the profile 1, then we can press A to go back to adjusting it, and something like that. You know, we're just dealing with the reinforcement early, just so we don't have to deal with it later. whenever we deal with the whole merge part of this process. So let's take this. First, let's apply the mirror. Let's never apply to subd. We already did that once today. We don't need to do it again. So after performing a union, we can now visual geometry. Oh, here I am making a big mistake. We want to apply to Boolean, but we do not want to apply to subd. And now we can actually get in here and begin making some final solves to this to just unify this with the surface, because with bevel's a different type of warden. It's a little bit easier to manage, but whenever it comes to subdivision requires a bit of perfection, and definitely papers, paper please is like the rules of subdivision to me. Like, it wants to see your paperwork. It wants you to explain the topological changes that you're attempting to suggest to it, and also why, and as well as the benefits. There's just so much information that subd needs to be successful, and us getting in and just solving things is us basically providing it that information. I mean, we're doing a little bit of a redirect here, causing a little bit of a skew, but I am hoping it's going to pay off, even though we are making some very hard topological decisions without even checking around for what our ramifications are. And let's slide this back. Let's slide this back. And continuing on. And now we can look at this area that's also slightly questionable. And the next thing is we're going to grab this loop, bevel it in order to add an additional loop. And we're just going to bring this down. And let's form a connection, form another connection, and so far so good. And we just slide these in. And something like that. With this piece, we will just bring it down to its level and then make a junction there. And we can make connections for all of these loops, even though it's slightly unnecessary. We could be doing some efficiencies as well, but this is some kind of mid-poly modeling. I'm not sure what strategy I used before, if I was trying to go for a mid-poly solution, but I generally always opt for kind of a mid-poly solution on these things because it just gives me a little bit more control at the expense of a little bit more geometry. So continuing on, let's take this into local mode so we can dance with it quietly in the moonlight. And it looks like we're going to be around the same time as our initial attempt, with maybe even less progress due to me choking on some areas. So somewhat embarrassing. I'm going to have to try it again 50 times as punishment. But that be life. On a serious note though, I will be practicing this probably like 50 more times until it is trivial. And we'll just bring this across. Maybe like so. And let's just make the connection here. And we'll just hold that for just a moment, just in case we do actually need to continue it. But really, we're still on our dangerous decision tour of just making dangerous decisions across our mesh. Maybe to something like that. We'll press J. And this area is a turn, so we could sacrifice it and just make it work, but really the negotiation for this area is going to be a little bit tight. I mean, just looking at that untended end, we got to get rid of that. And you would think this is like the hell of subd, but the hell is actually the part where we were trying to deal with that plane on the other side of the model. This is just zoning out and just trying to stay attached to this particular reality as we continue on with this brainlessly easy work. So you know, what's the worst parts of 3D? The parts that require the most keystrokes, or the part that requires the absolute most brain power, where one wrong move that you make out of 65 moves will determine your fate 65 moves later, and that one is unchangeable. Like, you have to actually go back to a previous point in your progress. For me, it's the latter. You know, like when it comes to applying a block in or applying that level and committing to the next thing, like for me, it's a big part of the process. You know, it's definitely not something I take lightly, because when you commit to it, you have to solve it all the way around, all the way through. And so, you know, I'll probably review this video and see how some of my previous decisions doomed me in the future, setting me up for this moment where I'm merging a 32 round into a subdiv applied mesh. But it's always interesting to just kind of play back these processes, try to understand what happened. Even though I don't know what the bottom is, we're just going to put something there, except we're going to put something better there. You know, we definitely want some spans in this puppy. So maybe something like that. We'll roll it around like a car. And at least now we have a nice solve for this side. So, you know, we're just talking about how bad it was, and now we're done. So, you know, 0 brain power. So is it the worst process in the world to have to do this? If you ask me, I would say, no. There's some parts involving shapes and sorting out shapes and maintaining shapes and topology that, you know, as I've been doing this challenge, I've just been wondering, I'm like, what's the biggest, worst part of this whole thing? And, you know, it's probably the one I was talking about, where you make a mistake in your past that impacts you so deeply into the future, it can't be foreseen. So, you know, really dangerous stuff. You know, not to get all Primus on you, but time travel, man. So let's bring another loop around. And for this loop, we just want to just interject into this loop, that loop. So let us, all right, how did I create a spiral? It started innocently enough, and then it became this. So we select it again, and let's actually undo what we just did, because I think we tried to merge multiple loops together. This was our first loop, this is our second loop. There is no way we can quad this loop unless we basically add a loop to collide with it, turning it into a redirect. But really, we over obsess. These things are so unnecessary. But I'm telling you, with topology, you can find yourself just getting caught up in another loop eternal struggle. So if we look at our shape, I'm actually more pleased with this one than the previous result. However, topologically, there are some things I feel that can be refined. So, you know, until I find the perfect solution, I will continue to ponder that. But if there's one thing you know about me, I won't be giving up. And because we applied the mirror, we now have to deal with every side individually. So, you know, that part of the process when you commit to it is, I want to use the word no fun, but it's life. You know, you got to commit at some point. And we're doing some experimental solutions in this area, just downright not smart stuff in this area, just because I thought I could re-quad that, but really I should just leave it where it is. But we do want to maybe slide this away a little bit, because the rules of sub-D shrinkage are absolute. Sub-D is gonna shrink you like a winter storm. But if we slide it out just a little bit, it'll at least hold its integrity together. So this area, highly sus. You know, we just walked up onto, I don't even know. But what I do know is we are going to slide at it to alleviate it and just kind of relax it. You know, we can diamond quad that out, which will give us a better turn there. And let's just redefine this area into something like that. You know, just really thinking on my feet there with these solutions because I'm out of patience. We're 45 minutes into this. This piece is a total PITA, and we still have more work to do. So I am still pondering deep down where the placement of this thing is. And because of its placement on the washer itself, because I mean, if we look at this one, it obviously isn't in the middle. And if we look at this one, it kind of looks like it's underneath and it comes up. So we're actually going to put this extra piece here, but instead of making a piece and then union joining it, we're going to try something different. So let's bring back up our reference. And if we look at our reference, we see that, you know, not that point, maybe this point is pretty close. I'm actually going to duplicate it off because life's too short to try to be efficient. And we'll just break this shape off, press P, make it our own. And this will be our thing that we will create and then merge in. Sometimes it's easier to just create these things separately, solve them separately, solve them in their entirety, and then just merge them on. So let's just do that. You know, looking at this thing, it's like, what shape is this? You know, story of my life, blurry images. But let us just draw our shapes, and we're pressing B, roll the wheel, set ourselves to about 3 segments because Subdivision has our back, and we'll just cut all the way through. And you know, we can do one more where we just create a boundary loop around it. We could do it later, but let's just get it out the way now. So Control T, Alt J. Oof, did not work out. So a degree of simplification is going to be needed. And then we select both these pieces and press Control T, Alt J. And it almost worked out, except this area requires definition. Let's try that again. Select this, jump here. Now that area has adequate definition. And now this area has adequate definition. So the only reason I'm solving this, even in this preliminary state, is just being weird. I don't know. I'm always changing up things about the way that I work just to find out, you know, maybe there's a better way. Maybe it's right in front of me. Maybe I haven't pressed a combination of keys. Our bevel is set to a shape of 1, so we'll need to set it to 0.5 to get something nice and rounded. But we're going to need to revert that back whenever it comes to subdivision. So what this is our shape, we could just extrude this down, basically making this a solid shape. No need to bring solidify into it. And let's just grab this, press I to inset, and let's actually just solve this top area, and then we can deal with the bottom. So at the very least, I'm going to place a loop here, origin to selection, Alt X, bisect mod to split half of it off, so that way we don't have to look at the other side. So I'm just looking at the reference, and we're definitely going to need to grab this side and define it so we get something like that. This area also will need to be defined, so just something like that. This area on the inside, who even cares, but something like that, just so curvature doesn't eat its lunch. F, you know, F this, F that, you know, like Fred Durst, you know, just Monday want to break stuff, today's a Friday, so we can't break stuff, we gotta continue. Let's add a loop here, continuing that into a quad. Let's give this to this area because they just look like they were made to be together. And I'm just pressing F and seeing, I'm like hoping, hey, maybe this will pan out, maybe this one will pan out, maybe this is the one where it gets back on track. But we'd have to slide it like that in order to get that to pan out. And then for this one, we would need to add a loop, we would need to add another loop, you know, really guiding our solution along. With this area, 1 loop must prevail, 2 loops must go. So But let's rethink that. Let's press F. And really it's this area that isn't offering enough leniency. So if we get to here, we see that, you know, it's almost correct. We want basically these to work, but maybe something like that. But we can actually just place a loop in the middle and have something like that, like a redirect happening, just to bring that to something sensible. Like I said, it's real easy to get like crazy on some geo, try to solve it super efficiently, waste hours on a corner, which is, to me, way worse. You know, you don't want to lose that sort of time. So we're just looking at our shape's looking good. You know, we should probably give it some sort of definition on the very edge where it's going to be meeting this. Like, I'm thinking this, I know, kind of strange, but this is all that's going to be sticking out whenever this thing merges with this other surface. So solving that early will be to our advantage. And we don't want to leave any of these loose points undealt with, or else that's something else we have to deal with. So looking at this, I'm thinking this piece is there this time. I mean, I just don't know. I'm going to have to find out, because you can't be modeling from images and not know where these things are connected. So with this piece, let's remove subdivision. We can leave mirror on because we're going to have to solve double, but I don't want to solve double. I want to solve single. So let us form a connection like so. And before that, let's get rid of this flow from coming into it. So a little bit of subd merge transplant business about to be happening. I'm just really thinking on the fly. I still haven't come up with a concrete linear workflow for how I want this particular shape to be done. So let's press V, L, P to separate it, and let's take both of these shapes in local mode. And we don't need subdivision, but we do need to union these together, getting us that, and we can just turn off subdivision. And the first question I have is, why is there not a hole? So let's change this from exact to fast. We see that with fast it gets weirder. So let's press Q, ever scroll, let's bring it back, shift N just to recalc those normals, and now it's actually looking correct. So sometimes normals will get you. And so always be vigilant whenever it comes to normals. So now that it's applied, the party can starty. Sorry, it sounded funnier in my head. So let us just begin sliding things around. Remembering that the border of this shape is so important for transplant purposes. If we get in and just start messing things up, then the transplant just won't work out. So such debates in this mesh to consider, but these are the solutions that I'm currently seeing in front of my face that I'm going through. You know, we want to protect our boundary, maybe exit box cutter for this internal mesh discussion. So this area, definitely a conundrum. My solution, consolidation. It's my only solution. Let us slide this to here. We will form this connection. We will all meet up at this area because it just looks like such a good place to party. I mean, how good of a place to party? Well, I mean, maybe even, I was about to say even the neighbors are going to come over, but the neighbors have their own party. We'll just party with them over here. Let's make this connection. Let's forget about that connection. Let's make this connection. Let's just forget about all of these connections and just rewrite the destiny of these connections. So is this process the worst? You know, is the question I ask myself. Is it the worst to have to get in and solve geometry? Just kidding. But considering how hard it is to do some of just the shape solving itself and keeping it maintained topologically across layers, I would say there are worse hells in this hell that we can enter. 7 hells. What in the 7 hells is this? This is what we could be saying at this geometry, but we're making it, man. And that's all we can do is just survive. I mean, we could do more than that, definitely. Not saying we are limited to just that. And really, I'm just rethinking these extra loops I added, because first of all, these loops went so far that I have to undo their addition to this world, because you just think, hey, I can just add some loop cuts willy-nilly. Heck no. You start circumnavigating a form, Amerigo Vespucci, and you will find out that these are not Indians. These are not Indians at all. So let us grab this and just deselect it, and we will bevel and then dissolve that one, which will turn it into an alt quad flow. So this is what we're looking at so far. And by so far, I mean we're so done. I'm shamed for my over obsession with topological perfection. But let us add a loop to connect with that area, because it's the underface, so I feel I can get away with it. And let's turn subdivision geometry back on, and this please, guys. God, what's going on with me? We'll press P, set our angle back to 1, and let's just crease that up just a little bit. And this is what we're looking at now. So 5 minutes in geometric pain can save you a lifetime in car insurance. I mean, maybe, I don't know. And I'm going to first hide this, and then reach over to the other side and try to take out the same region, but it appears that we did some heavy poly topological changes on the other side of this as well. So let's try to get in there. I'm just pondering solutions. Should I rip this off completely, close it short, and then get this on the other side like that? Or should I take this piece that we bowled and also bowl it onto the other side, basically reopening the doors of this hell? Or should we analyze how much we messed up? So let's hide the pieces that, let's Alt H, bring it back again. And this is the piece we actually want, because we have a connection here. And let us duplicate this, Control M, X to mirror this to the other side. And let's look at what damage we have. So for the most part, we could do this. But because of Life by Marshall Mathers, we cannot. So we are going to have to come up with a unique topological decision for that side. So let us bring back the cutter that was used, which was this. And we just want to place our 3D cursor in the center. And I'm just going to shift deduplicate it, set my pivot to the 3D cursor, Control M, X. And let us come out of local, go back to this side where this piece just isn't going to work out. And this piece is going to work out. So let's just hide that. We want to hide what's not needed, because we have our duplicate that we have from earlier. Control J to join them, select all, and we will just choose to remove by distance. And if we shift tilde, we see that there's no holes because there's no boundaries. However, on this side, there is that boundary from ours, just taking that cap in. I'm going to apply the scale, which means that we have to press Shift N to recalc the normals, and then from there we can do a Boolean union on this particular piece. So let's first double check and make sure that our cutter has no subdivision. Excellent. And now we get to solve this one in as well. So its own special, it's a special hell, but it is ours. So let us not apply visual geometry to mesh, for that would apply sub D, giving us the D. So just solving it, we're just learning what we did from before, just a repeat lesson. So maybe something like that. GG. Really just analyzing what we have and what we should do with it. I mean, I don't care about any of the topology for flat areas. That could probably be on a t-shirt where I was gonna say no flat chicks, but that sounds really sexist. What I really mean is no flat faces. You know, I just don't care. If you want, you can get in there and give them a intricate topological solution. But for me, the flatter the face gets, the more relaxed my solutions tend to get, where by the end of it, I'm a barbarian caring only about the perimeters and nothing else. So just really thinking about how I want this area to flow around. You know, we don't want to make it too different from the other side, but this particular mesh is it's a particular type of evil. So let us get in and focus on our survival. So this piece I want to give to this area because it just seems like a good decision, which means we can begin having a loop that's protecting the perimeter on the inside while we basically consolidate everything to that flow that we have our eyes on. So this aspect of modeling can be a little difficult to explain, but yeah, I'm just really linearly thinking about just one area of the mesh, and that is the perimeter that we're drawing in, because as long as that perimeter is right, we will definitely be able to get a satisfactory result whenever it comes to subdivision interpreting what we have created. So many near misses. Like, we're walking all this geometry to base. This is like baseball, but we're hitting all balls. Just nothing but balls. Base is loaded. We got another ball batter out. So let us just get to work solving. Just thinking about who is the most important. And if they're the most important, should they just get exactly everything? I guess that's the easiest way to explain it, but you know, should they get everything on this loop, or should the loop break off and retain its own self-control? It's always hard to decide. So let's bring this up, and I feel like these loops are really, they're so tempting. They want us to really get in there and loop them. They're like, yo, you give us a loop, we'll loop so good, I promise you, boy. But don't listen to them. They're lying. They're singing a siren song, and our ship's gonna wreck. In fact, we just fell for the siren song because, watch, let me show you. If we undo this, we almost made the same choice on the other side. But if we just slide this down like so, and we slide this up, we can actually solve like that, which is way more efficient. We can see how it looks on sub D, where, you know, sub D is just such a cruel master. So you're lucky if you survive them. Otherwise, sub D is just gonna beat you with a cane like Cranky Kong, just knots all over your head. And we're just thinking about choices still. I mean, I really shouldn't even bother with making choices for this area because we have 4 of them we have to remake. So let's press Alt V and just look at our wireframe. And this is our attempt at making this shape the second time. So my goal was really to keep this particular plane compared to the reference and try to get the curvature that was happening with it. I appeared to have failed with keeping the curvature that's happening with this side. So there's always something more that will have to be done, but it's such a curious shape that it just continues to pique my curiosity. So this is my, well, on video, in video lore, we'll call it second attempt, but in reality, this is like my 5th attempt, and it's just such a deceptive shape that I almost can't leave it behind, but we can at least wrap this for now, and I thank everyone for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.